Welcome.
Bine ați venit!
Aloha! Bem-vindos!
Yemawan Akwaba.
G'day!
Susday, yung Samswakum net.
Bienvenidos.
Welcome.
Mabuhay!
Welcome.
Mainiton.
We welcome you to the 2020
Affirmation International Conference.
Te damos la bienvenida a la Conferencia Internacional de Afirmación 2020.
Bem-vindos à Conferência Internacional da Afirmação de 2020.
Affirmation creates worldwide communities of safety,
of love and hope.
A afirmação ela cria comunidades globais de segurança, de amor, de esperança.
A afirmación crea comunidades mundiales de seguridad, amor y esperanza.
And promotes understanding,
acceptance, and self-determination.
Y promueve la comprensión, aceptación y autodeterminación.
E promove a compreensão, aceitação e a autodeterminação
of individuals of diverse sexual orientations,
gender identities, and gender expressions.
de indivíduos de diversas orientações sexuais, como identidade de gênero e expressões.
De individuos sexuales, identidades de género y expresiones.
We affirm the inherent self-worth of LGBTQIA+ individuals
as complete, equal, and valuable persons.
Nós afirmamos o valor inerente das pessoas LGBTQIA+, como pessoas inteiras, iguais e valiosas.
Afirmamos el valor inherente de las personas LGBTQ como personas iguales, completas y valiosas.
And support them as they define their individual spirituality
and intersection with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
E nós a apoiamos na sua definição de espiritualidade individual e relacionamento com a Igreja de Jesus Cristo dos Santos dos Últimos Dias.
Apoyamos a definir su espiritualidad individual y su relación con la Iglesia de Jesucristo de los Santos de los Últimos Días.
Affirmation is a refuge to lend, to heal,
to share, and to be authentic.
A afirmação é um refúgio, é um lugar para encontrar, para curar, para compartilhar, para ser autêntico.
Afirmación es un refugio para llegar, para sanar, para compartir y ser auténtico.
We are so glad you are here.
We are so glad you are here.
Estamos muy contentos de que estés con nosotros.
We are so glad you are here.
E nós estamos muito felizes que você está aqui.
We are so glad that you're here.
We are so glad you are here.
Welcome to Affirmation.
Bienvenidos a Afirmación.
Welcome to Affirmation.
Welcome to Affirmation.
Bienvenido a Afirmación.
Welcome to Affirmation.
Seja bem-vindo à afirmação.
Welcome to Affirmation.
Llamamos Akwaba Eba Conference. Yeah.
Good morning, and welcome to Week 3 of the 2020 Affirmation International Conference. These past 2 weekends, we have had some great workshops, and today is expected to be just as outstanding. It is my pleasure to introduce our guest to begin today's workshops. Blaire Ostler will be hosting a question and answer session with filmmaker, writer, and activist Dustin Lance Black. Blaire is a philosopher specializing in queer studies and a leading voice at the intersection of queer, Mormon, and transhumanist thought. She's an author, publishing her first book, Queer Mormon Theology, an Introduction. She is a board member of the Mormon Transhumanist Association and the Christian Transhumanist Association, and also Sunstone. Blaire is an artist and poet and spends her time hiking, painting, writing, and bickering with her friends about almost any topic. Blaire and her husband Drew reside in Utah with their 3 children. Dustin Lance Black is an Academy Award-winning filmmaker, writer, and social activist. He won an Oscar and 2 Writers Guild of America awards for his screenplay Milk, the biopic of activist Harvey Milk, which starred Sean Penn, and then in 2018 received the Valentine Davies Award from the Writers Guild of America for his overall body of work. Black was also a founding board member of the American Foundation for Equal Rights, which successfully led the federal cases for marriage equality in California and in Virginia, which included putting an end to California's discriminatory Proposition 8. As a reminder, The final plenary will be held Sunday, October 4th via Zoom with guest speaker Carol Lynn Pearson, followed by an attendee story sharing session. Following Blaire and Dustin Lance Black's discussion this morning, stay tuned for instructions from Joel McDonald, Affirmation's Director of Operations, regarding the workshop format. Now, please join me in welcoming Blaire Ostler and Dustin Lance Black.
Welcome, everyone, to this amazing session of the Affirmation International Conference. We have with us Dustin Lance Black. Lance, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's an absolute treat.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad you invited me. You invited me home, really.
First things first, I have to just bring up Milk. It was unbelievable. All the accolades were well-deserved. When you're sitting down to write one of these, I'm going to say epic stories, there's really been nothing quite like it. How does the story process work for you? Who are you writing for? Because your writing seems to come from someplace so deep.
Milk was very much written for me. And that's not always the case. Milk was something that I thought, boy, what would I have liked to have seen when I was a youngster, an adolescent, coming up in the world and understanding all that was against me for who I am, and tried to keep it as accessible as I could so that it could be, I hope, enjoyed by people who like to dive into politics, but also by young people who were just looking for that hope that Harvey promised so long ago.
You wrote the story that needed to be told, right? You needed to tell the story. And it's really, I feel like, in some ways about paying it forward, you know, like for all the queer youth out there.
Our histories have been buried out of shame and fear. And frankly, history is where we find strength. History is where we find confidence and truth. And when we might not have, you know, the father and mother figures we hoped in terms of support, we can turn to history and to those matriarchs and patriarchs who came before us in the queer liberation movement, who fought for us. I haven't been shy about the fact that part of my mission in my life is to rebuild that lost history, because I think it's valid and I think it's valuable.
How much has your background in Mormonism and growing up in Mormonism affected your work today? Do you still see it as part of your work, or do you see yourself as totally removed from it? How does that Mormonness play out in your work today?
In almost every way possible. I don't believe there's a God who would have created us only to hate us, only to have us removed from our families in this life or eternally. It just doesn't make sense. And so I have to have faith that the church will shift and the church will change and it'll become more accepting and you'll start to see the damage that it's done. And in the meantime, I don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, because I learned a lot about what's made me successful either in a creative world or in a political world from Mormons. And in fact, from conservative folks and conservative Mormons. You know, I get my work ethic, I think, from having grown up Mormon, putting my shoulder to the wheel. I learned early on that family comes first. And I think that whenever I've lost my perspective there, whenever I start to put other things first, I can feel myself just growing less happy, less grounded. I also learned from the Mormon church to stand up for yourself, to be willing to bear your testimony when you believe fervently in something. And I've had to put that to good use with things like marriage equality in the United States. It was very Mormon of me to have the courage to stand up and share what's in my heart, to treat others how you would like to be treated. That golden rule that I learned from Mormonism, I think, is the rule to help fix the ills that keep us separated to this day, particularly in the United States, to heal the divides. All of that I learned from growing up LDS.
I would love to hear more about your journey and how you process that to what does family mean then as opposed to what does family mean now for you?
Right. Well, it's not so different in many ways. And let's be frank for a second. It's rather rich of Mormons to say that they've had a singular definition of family. I don't think my gay family is all that different, if we really sat down and talked about it, than your most quote unquote traditional contemporary Mormon family. I mean, when it comes down to it, I got a 2-year-old in this house. So we're talking about no sleep. We're talking about potty training, accidents, we call them nappies here, diapers, prams, figuring out what schools to go to, what's best for them. I mean, in almost every way, I'm sure our concerns are about the same. So how is that very different except that there's 2 fathers in our household? For LGBTQ people, there's a second kind of family that sometimes is absolutely necessary, and it's the family you build and the family you have to choose. Because sadly, all too often, Mormon queer kids are told to leave home, and at which point you still need a support system to survive. You need a family. And so many of us over the years have had to find a new family, and it's the family we choose.
For a lot of queer Mormons, there's a lot of internalized self-hatred, like God hates me. How did you go from God hates gays to God created us in all our infinite diversity? And isn't that beautiful? So how did you make that mental switch? Was that ever a mental switch for you?
I never believed God hated me.
Good. Yay. Excellent.
You know, anybody watching this right now, just find your quiet place, whatever that means for you. And tune out all of the words of human beings for a second. Listen to your heart and ask that magic, that beautiful beating heart, if its creator hates it. No way. And so I had to square it though, because it wasn't making sense, because I had all these people in my life who I loved dearly. You know, that's the challenge in Mormonism. Unlike other faiths, like I loved my bishop in our ward. I loved our first counselor. I loved the Relief Society president. I was so excited when my mom became Relief Society president. Like you're actually very close to these people. You know, you love them. So how do you square that they say these things about you, and you know it's about you, but in your heart, you know a creator wouldn't have created you as a mistake, as a flaw. You know this isn't some kind of choice like people are saying. So it actually just takes time to square it and to figure it out. And it did take a long time, and I did go through a pretty dark place because I didn't want to lose my family. I didn't want to lose the community in my church. These were the only people I know, but they weren't making any sense. And if you really listen to your heart, you know what they're saying isn't true, and they're not getting it. And I was too young to be able to formulate the ideas and the words to convey what was going on with me. And I did go to a dark place. I did become depressed. I write in my book, which I really never shared, the ways in which I contemplated ending things, because it was so tough to square, and I feared losing my community. And like I was about to say, you know, Mormonism is so 7 days a week, and it's so insular. You know, it's terrifying to think you might lose that if you're honest. Eventually, you start to reach out. And you find out, I think the best thing I would say for mental and emotional health for a queer Mormon is to find others, to find a support system, to realize you're not alone out there. And that's so much easier today than it was when I was a kid. It was almost impossible, but now you can. And I think then you realize, oh, I'm not broken. There is a lack of understanding.
And I couldn't agree with you more. Like, my church definitely has room for improvement when it comes to that.
I mean, come on. When I was born, you couldn't be Black and have the priesthood.
Right. Yep. Continuing revelation is a real thing.
Revelation. If the church makes you think twice about the value of your existence when you're hurting no one, about the value of your love, a love that can grow, that can create relationships that last a lifetime, where you take care of one another, that can create family units, that can create joy and prosperity and stability. And if faith makes you question that, then you might start to question that faith. And so I'm ready for a queer revelation, and it's past due.
Amen. Amen. No, I love that. I want to talk to you a little bit more about Mama's Boy. Okay, so full disclosure, I loved it more than Milk. It was unbelievable. You were talking about part of your journey, basically coming out and realizing with yourself, you're out at college, and you had this comment where you were exploring with other gay people, and you're like, I'm not that type of gay. And I loved that line so much, because I think there's such a process in a queer person's life where we have our own ideas of like what gay people are like, and we realize, oh, I'm not like that gay people. But then it's kind of like, oh, maybe I am and am not in a little way. I'm still not sure. I would love to hear more of your process of just like, or your story of how you came into yourself a little more, decided to be a little more open, to shed some of those layers and be like, oh, okay, it's okay to be who I am.
Living a lie, it injures you every single day in small and large ways. And if you think the small ways don't count, know that if you just take a little chunk, tiny little imperceptible chunk out of yourself every single day, well, by year's end, there's far less of you. By decade's end, you're mostly gone. The manifestation of 20 years of having little chunks of me taken away turned into a depression. It turned into suicidal thoughts. For me, it came down to live or die. Sadly, it came down to live or die. I was lucky in that I had a stepfather who was transferred to an army base in California. I was always into theater, but now theater in California, I met some actual gay people, and they did not line up with everything I'd heard about gay people. There were no horns hiding under their hair. They didn't seem sick. They didn't seem, demented in all these ways I heard they would be. They didn't seem mentally ill or like criminals. They actually seemed quite happy in the face of an epidemic that was going on called AIDS at the time. And still there was joy. Still there was reason to live. And it gave me a little hope. It opened a window where I got to learn about people like Harvey Milk. I found out that there were people, foremothers and forefathers, who had been fighting for me, even just in that part of San Francisco, since well before I was born. Phyllis and Dell, Harvey Milk, Jose Sarria. I didn't know I had that family.
I've interviewed a lot of queer Mormons before, and it's so funny to me how you can get these like weirdly conservative queer people on and have these ideas about like, oh, I just want to find a nice guy, settle down, have a kid or two. I mean, is that crazy? And it's like literally the most traditional narrative you've ever heard in your life. It's just with a man or a woman, like that's the only change.
I know, it's true. You want to have, on my very first date with Tom, we broke every rule right away. Like only a Mormon would, and a miracle that he somehow didn't think I was nuts. You can ask any of my exes, saying I love you, just give me at least 6 months to a year, right? Boyfriends, oh my gosh, I need 2 to 3 years. That's a lot, that's a lot. We said I love you, we called each other boyfriends within the first few hours, and by the end of the first date, we had named our children. I'm Mormon, but I also don't, I just want to be very, very clear that I don't think everybody ought to be like that. So for me, that's what I want. I'm not doing it for anyone else.
Well, and that's so beautiful too. There's really not like one right way to be Mormon, and there's really not one right way to be gay or to be queer or bi or whatever. Each of us is just following our own path.
Oh, yeah. There's no one right way to be queer.
I want to stay tuned on all things Dustin Lance Black right now. What's going on?
There's probably some things of interest for this audience, so I'll just name those. I'm doing a film on Bayard Rustin at Netflix. And Bayard was a queer civil rights fighter who was a father figure to Martin Luther King and organized the March on Washington. And Milk has always inspired me and been a very hopeful story, but Bayard Rustin's very much been my guiding light. in life. And so I'm so thrilled we're finally making it closer to home and likely a bit controversial. As much as I think it's critical that we address how queer people are treated in the Mormon faith, having seen what my mother had to survive, and my mother was a devout Mormon, I also think it's incredibly important that we confront the treatment of women in the Mormon Church. And so I am at FX bringing Under the Banner of Heaven to the screen as a TV series, which holds the Mormon Church to account for the treatment of women, and a true crime thriller, if you haven't read the book. And I think it's about time.
I also heard from a birdie, tell me if this is true or not, that Mama's Boy might be made into a movie. Is this true?
Yeah, we have, there's a documentarian who would like to, do a documentary version of it. And that might have me back in Utah if that happens. I hope it happens. We'll see. In this COVID time, it's tough to do things like documentaries because you got to be around people.
Well, thank you so much, Lance. This has been absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for sharing more of your story and your time with us. I couldn't be more appreciated. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very, very much. And next time, I hope to be there.
Yes.
When we can, and to be near each other. All right, I can't wait. I can't wait.
Excellent. Thanks everyone for tuning in. This has been Dustin Lance Black. Thank you so much.